of work. I became an ADHD workplace advocate. So I will tell you more about this as we go. I want to introduce you to the why behind what I do. I come from a country of wealth inequality. You might have heard of Petronas Twin Towers or the beautiful Langkawi Island, or even our multi-racial, multi-ethnic community. But at the background of this veneer of beauty lies, the houses that were built from tin roofs, just behind these corporate skyscrapers. Our society values education and achievement, and success is measured through material wealth and the connection to the powerful. And I know firsthand what it feels like, the consequences of this wealth inequality. When my dad's business filed for bankruptcy when I was age 11, and that landed my family in financial instability for most of my teenage years. And I can tell you now, when you are at the unfortunate side of this system, there is so much turbulence that comes within the family, the ensuing trauma and the lower self-belief, your self-esteem really suffers. Bear in mind that I was also living with undiagnosed ADHD, so it was a compounded effect. But I recognize that education can change my life, and I started working harder, and really trying to, just get better at studying, which didn't come that easy. We know that the system is a one-size-fits-all, which emphasizes on performance and outcome, and being an undiagnosed and untreated student with ADHD, it's really difficult, in this system. It's so hard for ADHDers, to fit into the system. Yet we are the product of such systems, right? Churning through a conveyor belt of life. Can ADHDers achieve in these systems? I don't know if I was an outlier, but I learned through how I failed, because very early in school, I failed, to achieve in things that I didn't have interest in, but then did really well in what I love. So my grades were either an A or an F. So I'm here to tell you the story of how I got the Prime Minister's scholarship as a student with undiagnosed ADHD. Through failing and knowing what habits led me there, I thought of creative solutions to overcome them. I didn't know if they would work, but I knew that if I didn't have them, I would definitely fail. So I sat in front of the class for most of the class, and this I knew came, to be useful to reduce distractions. I took notes furiously while lecturers were speaking, and I knew that in order to concentrate better, I needed to do another thing at the same time. I also planned very methodically in my diary. This helped with time management and for me to anticipate the future. I very anally time block revisions leading up to exams, and this helps with time blindness and to stay organized. In order to deal with the limiting self-beliefs that I had, I constantly place visual motivational quotes in front of me where I could see them, and this helped to overcome my inner critic, and also the object impermanence where we only know about the things that we can see, and if we don't see them, then they don't exist, right? To compensate for poor working memory, I tend to cram revisions in the night before the exams. And on the day of my exams, I ate tuna sandwich because I heard that it has DHA, but what I didn't know also that it has omega-3 that helps the ADHD brain. And just before I entered the exam, chocolate bar was gulped down because apparently it increased the dopamine in your brain. But I think the single most important thing that made a difference, in my systems were to have a really supportive mentor. I was working with a very well-known scientist within Malaysia who went to study a PhD in the labs of people who used to work with the creator of the PCR test, Carl Mallis. And so having this well-connected mentor provided opportunities I was unaware of. And that was the Prime Minister's scholarship, which, with all these strategies to hack my ADHD, having a supportive mentor in a crisis situation, having a can-do mindset with all my motivational quotes, I graduated top of my class, won the Young Scientist Award, and then also the Prime Minister's Scholarship to study in the UK. And I wish I can tell you now that I went on to become a top scientist. I was very successful, but it wasn't the case. Instead, this is what happened. My PhD came with a lot of difficulties because I had two very unsupportive mentors, and there were a lot of criticisms which compounded my sense of RSD. I also wasn't really that interested in what I was doing anymore, so it was very difficult to stay motivated. But then because I kind of pulled through to the end, and it was really a make or break situation where, you know, I was either going to throw away the last 5 years or actually make it into something. And having this crisis situation that I put myself into, I managed to graduate with like a PhD, and I got some job offers to study at Harvard Medical School, but I decided that at the time that I didn't want to do it anymore. So what I then did was follow my interests. I was really interested to become a writer. So became a writer I did. I wrote travel blogs for the Huffington Post. I became a columnist for the Star Metro newspaper in Malaysia. I ran a soft furnishing business where I was exercising some creativity. And so I managed to do commercials. I acted and modeled in commercials in the last 10 years, and that is still something that I love doing. And apart from all this, I managed to keep a finger in the corporate and 9-to-5 life by working as a communications officer, consultant in all these companies. But the one thing that I really struggled with between each transition was, why was it so difficult for me to stay in a linear career path, right? A lot of people do it. And I didn't really have the answers, but I knew that I got bored once the challenge was no longer there. And I looked for the next thing. So shiny object syndrome, I didn't know. But I was interested to find out. Being diagnosed with ADHD this year at the age of 40, put all the puzzles in together, and now it all fits. Having an interest-based nervous system meant that I was never really going to do something that other people thought was important. In order to investigate what ADHD is, I looked into the history. So believe it or not, this is an 80-year-old stigma. You know, it's old enough. It started in the 1940s. People associated behavioral problems with brain damage. And because the symptoms that ADHD, you know, like the symptoms you get in this condition, hyperactive, impulsive, and inattentive, is also the same as encephalitis. So it further compounds, you know, the reasoning that ADHD was caused by brain injury. 5 to 10% of the world's population have it. And the ratio of boys to girls with ADHD is 3-1 or 9-1, depending on the country and where you look. So is it a wonder that this gender bias in diagnosis is causing many girls with the symptoms that are not really recognized within society to fly under the radar? I found an amazing visual created by someone I came across with early this year when I was looking into ADHD in women. This is quite a heart-wrenching representation of what happens to girls and women with ADHD when you live decades being undiagnosed. The gender bias in diagnosis causes a lot of misdiagnosis, mainly also because healthcare professionals are unaware of what to look for. And society being the way it is, you know, has caused girls to internalize a lot of their symptoms, causing misdiagnosis, depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorder, body dysmorphia, eating disorder, executive function delay is what you see, you know, in girls who come forward to try and get a diagnosis. With the lack of support and treatment comes problem in schools, navigating social relationships, our career, motherhood, menopause and beyond. And we know that 42% of women who have menopause end up leaving their job. These are senior directors and senior managers who are quite high up in their organization and have spent a long time working on something. And when they hit menopause, if you have ADHD, the symptoms become more pronounced, and I find it even harder to cope, within the workplace. And I looked at the impact of ADHD on the fulfillment of potential. Through my work with ADHD Girls, I speak to hundreds of women with ADHD who gives me insights into this condition. And I see women who have achieved because of, not in spite of their ADHD. And then you have others who suffer from chronic employment issues, and find it very difficult to find a career that truly utilizes their strength. And I think to figure out what is going on, we need to look at the intersectionality of ADHD, of how ADHD intersects with culture, familial circumstances, society, and whether trauma is involved, and if there's a life crisis, to take them out of the situation, the impact of education, gender, and race. So John Bulwich, an actor with ADHD, summarizes this quite well, actually, the impact of ADHD. There is a fine line between capturing that explosive energy and becoming a champion athlete. And he gave the example of Wayne Rooney, who's a very famous and rich footballer based in the UK, or ending up on the scrap heap of life because of an inability to focus, losing countless of jobs, a life of petty crime. So having this unique insight into this problem, we wanted to know how we can help. A lot of us tend to look like this square peg trying to fit into a round hole. And if you spend decades trying to fit into somewhere you just couldn't fit, you really risk damaging the peg. Recognizing that there is a stigma for ADHD, where it's difficult to communicate your ADHD. It's difficult for me to tell people what ADHD is about, and difficulty for other people to understand. And I also recognize that ADHDers who suffer social and economic impact, not being able to hold down a job, that pays their bills. So ADHD girls want to work to help systems to understand and help ADHDers to reach their potential. So to speak, we're hoping to square the circle. So how we help girls and women with ADHD is through our strengths-based approach of ADHD. We speak to countless of women with ADHD with their lived experiences, because lived experiences is so validating. It's something so valuable that we should never overlook. I speak to ADHD specialists who offer insights and management strategies where it is otherwise locked behind paywalls. And this is all freely available on my YouTube channel. I also help ADHDers with a career communications program that I have, where I help them identify and communicate the value that they have in the world of work. I offer consultation and mentoring where I help ADHDers, especially parents of children with ADHD, to look for a diagnosis, and also researchers who want to know what kind of research parameters to include in their ADHD research papers. And because my passion is in helping people in the world of work, I became an ADHD workplace advocate. I run a LinkedIn Live series where I talk to a lot of people to generate ideas on how to support and harness the strengths of ADHDers. And I want to be partnering up with organizations to deliver ADHD workplace training to increase the awareness of this condition and to destigmatize ADHD. So we did Impact Survey recently. It was just over the weekend. So we asked them to answer 6 questions, and we got very good response. Some were from women with ADHD or non-binary individual with ADHD, and also parents of girls with ADHD. And we found that 100% of people who follow our work, and we're talking about the people who actually look at our videos and find an impact from them, And they say that it has helped them with a positive impact. It changed their life positively. And this impact, 88% of them said that it lasted the medium term to indefinite. So our work is changing lives indefinitely. And when we ask, is ADHD workplace advocacy important? 92% of them said yes. And I'm going to show you what they said. I'm going to show you what they said when we asked them, what do you think if the work we do in ADHD advocacy in the workplace does not occur as expected? And they wrote very worrying things. So that this reflects the problems that ADHDers face in workplace. There is a deep need for adjustments and support, and they constantly feel misunderstood. There is a fear of discrimination. There's a worry of not reaching one's potential. And there is a deep need to be recognized for one's strengths, and the worry about stigma against medication and diagnosis. They also feel that there is a lack of suitable environment in work, leading to burnout. And together with that, they think that the environment lacks ADHD awareness. There is poor mental health and quality of life, fear of being sidelined, lost opportunities from not fitting in, and unemployment. And this is all quite heart-wrenching. The consequences of unsupported ADHD in the workplace is that 30% of them end up having chronic employment issues, and 60% are likely to be fired or quit. And these are people who are trying to fit into the traditional societal systems, the systems that we have been using since the Industrial Revolution. The challenges that ADHDers feel at work is that there is a poor ADHD awareness and high stigma, leading to uncertainty to disclose. ADHDers are also unsure of where their strengths lie if they are utilized at work, and what the weaknesses are that they need help with. They find the environment unsuitable, and having an interest-based nervous system, they can really struggle to do what others think is important. The rejection sensitivity dysphoria cause poor mental health because of the difficulty in navigating work relationships. And the struggles with communications lead to lost opportunities for ADHDers at work. So what do you think is the ADHDer's key to work happiness? This is something I found from Attitude magazine. I adapted it slightly and then I added the fourth point. The key is to find the work that you love because you have an interest-based nervous system. And then to discover and harness the strengths of yours into the work that you love to do. Asking for support for your weaknesses in that you don't have to do it all alone. You can't do it all. To be happy in work, you have to trust in your workplace relationships, right? So this is a focus goal on what ADHDers can do to increase their workplace happiness. To find the work that you love, you should align your current role to see if your values and skills are being utilized there. You should also identify your strengths to know what your strengths are and see how your role utilizes this. You should list support for challenges that you need help with your ADHD, and you should check to see if you can do this without disclosing the ADHD first. Improving communications, because ADHDers can sometimes get too wrapped up in what you're doing that you forget to keep up the comms, to kind of like check in with your team regularly. And I think the single most important thing is to have a mentor to help you see if you're working on your strengths or not. And if not, can you switch to another role within the organization? I want to bring your attention to an alternate universe where we see ADHDers truly shine. There are no problems at work. They're happy doing what they're doing, and they really are famous for it, okay? So these are the people, they're famous, and these are the people you love to watch, you love to listen to, and the work of some of them has changed our lives indefinitely. And I think what they have in common is that they followed their interests, they tap into their talent, they capitalize on their strengths, and they stay in the career lane where they are able to offer the most value. Well, make no mistake, I'm pretty sure that all, if not most of them, have had help in tapping into their strengths. ADHDers often have above average human capital. I really believe that because I see it in myself and so many of the women I speak to, and the strengths that we have, that I would say normal mortals do not have is the creative problem solving, being hooked on a challenge and being so creative with it, that you can really think outside the box and do this 3D thinking. You are insatiably curious, and therefore the lifelong learning, continues all the time. And you're able to spot patterns and make connections, even in a chaotic situation. And most of us are very likable people who love to laugh and have good humor. We are incredibly calm under pressure. Most of us anyway, sometimes the anxiety gets in the way. We are very hardworking and tenacious when we're engaged. And the spontaneous ideas that pop in our brain can often lead to innovation. But what I want to ask you is that how much is your awareness in your value and where you truly shine? Are you aware of your strengths and your skills? So I want to bring your attention to what lies at the heart of communicating your value is self-awareness. So this extract I've taken from my Communicating Your Value framework, in which I created for ADHDers to discover and communicate their value in the world of work. So the very important basic is to understand the why behind what you do. And that is your life vision. Is your role aligned to your vision and your values? Does it utilize your strengths and skills? And the inner critic that we have, we need to revise internal dialogues that we have with ourselves. Because if you are going to be the single reason you do not make that first step, you can't hold yourself responsible for that, right? So we need to change what we tell ourselves. And in the module also, we look at how to discover your values. And these are the things that come naturally easy to us. The things that, the strengths and the skills we have that make it easy for us to do a certain task. So we also need to look at what environment enhances our productivity. So, this can range from having the right people, the right support in our sphere, to having assistive technology to help you with your work. And knowing this could also help you look for the right workplace adjustments. And having all this knowledge behind you will help you communicate your value, because being aware of your strengths, you'll be able to see are your strengths being utilized at work, and how can your company, your organization benefit from you utilizing your strengths. So I took an extract from my framework to show you how to communicate your value. So this is just for employees. I also have other guides for entrepreneurs and educators. So I'm sure you come across this framework, the STAR framework, where you talk about your work, but you talk about it in a sense where you give tangible examples of your achievements. So you can use this scenario when you go in to negotiate a job promotion or a raise in your salary. So you know that when you go in, you don't just say, I deserve a salary. You give the example of the situation where you provided value and what responsibility you had, the task that you had to do in that situation, and what action you took, right? That was unusual and above and beyond. Now you share the outcomes of your actions, where you save the company money, you tackled your work productively, and how your work impacted someone else. They all go into communicating your value. So I've said it time and again that individuals with ADHD often have above average human capital. But how can you succeed? Well, I'm going to say now that you can't succeed if you live with a deficit-based model. And I know on social media, there are women who do not like to frame ADHD as a superpower. And I don't agree that it's a superpower, although I wanted desperately to believe that when I first looked for a diagnosis, because what I wanted to know if I was okay. And how I then look at ADHD was through the social model of disability, where ADHD is only a disability because the social systems that we have makes us disabled. But we know that if you find the right thing that truly lights you up, there is no stopping you. And so Dr. Hallowell said here, so if you seek out and identify the talents, the interests and skills upon which you can build a life of success and joy, and this is how you can succeed as an individual with ADHD. I can't stress enough how important it is that apart from knowing what your value is, you should also know where and how to work to your strengths. So the question you need to ask yourself also is where you are utilizing your strengths. Are you in the right place to do it? Just to give you an example, I know entrepreneurs who end up starting their own venture, their own startups, because the job that they have, while it was great, it pays the bills, it didn't fully brought to life the skills that they wanted to demonstrate. So they set up their own venture and they channeled, their energy into something where all their strengths, are displayed, and it gives them more fulfillment that way. And so are you in the right place to utilize your strengths in your organization? If not within that team, is there another team for you? And what is the environment there like? Do you have a supportive mentor, a supportive team? All this plays a role in whether or not you can work to your strength. And there is the how to work to your strengths, the ADHD Owner's Manual, coined by Dr. William Dodson, a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, and ADHD expert. He looked into the circumstances in which we can succeed, to know what you need to get yourself in the zone. How do you get in the zone? For how long? And when do you get in the zone? These are all important for you to create, systems to help you, tap into your productivity. And this, incidentally, is something that you should communicate at work. The 9 to 5 is suited for people who have a brain that can be motivated by importance, but our brain is motivated by interest, challenge, novelty, urgency, and passion. So there is a productivity, we are more suited to working in a productivity block rather than all day. Also, when you start on your journey, you don't have to know it all, and you can always look for someone somewhere to help complement your strengths. So when I started ADHD Girls, what I was great at was showing my face, showing up for the work I do, communicating what my work was about. But I didn't really know the business know-how. I knew I wanted to make an impact, but I didn't know how to make it. I didn't know the legal systems, in setting up a not-for-profit and the fundraise and all sorts. But someone within my community recommended that I apply for the Impact Incubator program run by Hatch Enterprise. And I got in, and now they're helping me with so much, the business know-how, to propel the mission that I have to help empower girls and women with ADHD. And being in this environment is one of the best things that has ever happened to me, because not only that I get the knowledge, but I am in the environment of people with like-minded dreams and ambition. You know, all of them want to make a difference in the world. And some of them have come to help me as well, you know, in what I do. And the girl here, her name is Victoria Jenkins, and she has recently won the Startup of the Year award by Enterprise Nation. So imagine being in the vicinity of people who has gotten to where you want to get. You start to think that it is possible for yourself. And then, you know, you realize, what am I not doing there? Why am I here? So this is a question we should ask ourselves. So to summarize, how do we go from underperforming in our work to channeling our strengths to fulfill our potential? Bear in mind, we have an ADHD interest-based nervous system. We need the mindset to help us overcome the constant self-doubt that we have caused by our neurobiology. So we need to know the why behind what we do, because as ADHDers, if we don't see the point, we simply wouldn't engage, right? And so we should be mindful of the internal dialogues we tell ourselves. We don't tell ourselves the things that we don't hope to tell other people. You know, we have to be our biggest champion, basically. And to know how and when you work really well, to have the strategies to tap and hack into your ADHD, along with finding a mentor who is already at where you want to get at. And this will all contribute and help us channel our interests, skills, and talent to fulfill our potential. And then you go on to communicate your value. You need to shout about your work. You know, by shout about your work, I mean, you need to promote yourself. You don't go and be quiet and work very hard and hope that someone would notice. You have to talk about it, because we are living in the age of social media. And if you don't talk about it, we can easily get lost. And whilst talking about it, this will also help us find our allies. These are the people who can help elevate our work, be it an organization, an individual, or even an ally, a journey companion. And this is all very, very important in order to help us succeed as ADHDs. And I'm just going to end here with this video.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Have more confidence. And it's because I didn't that I didn't risk things, and that's what you've got to do. Just risk everything. And you know, there is no point living a life if you don't try things. And otherwise you're just a kind of scared person.
What advice would you give to
Sorry. So I'm going to stop there before it goes on a loop. I love this video, and I think the Coldplay song in the background really kind of like tugs at your heartstring, doesn't it? But the gist of it is to have more confidence, risk things, but don't risk it all, as this lady has said. Well, take calculated risks, because you can't tell individuals with ADHD with impulsivity to risk everything, because that's what they would do. Okay, so take calculated risks, find the right people to help you take those risks. Try something, don't be scared, step out of your comfort zone. So thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, Sam. That was amazing.
I was trying to unmute myself.
It's a challenge.
This is the second time I've actually, we spent some time when we were doing our podcast with you, and you are such an inspiration. And I'm sure everyone listening here today will feel like they can go and just harness all of the potential that they have. You just are such an amazing advocate and champion for ADHD, and I really thank you for being here. I neglected at the front end of this to indicate that we would be taking questions. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll let Sam answer those. We still have, a good length of time here to answer any questions. But I think one of the things I would like to ask Sam is, you mentioned that you were diagnosed at the age of 40.
Yeah.
What was the delay in you getting a diagnosis? How did you get to that at the age of 40?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So the reason it took me so long was there was lack of awareness, about ADHD. I've always known about ADHD, but I thought, like most women I talk to, that is a naughty boy syndrome.
Sorry, just everyone, if I could remind you to mute your mics. Thank you.
So,
sorry, Sam.
That's all right. So like most of the women I speak to, we thought that ADHD is a naughty boy syndrome, and we didn't know that, girls who are not overtly hyperactive and impulsive can have ADHD too. Although, with ADHD, you do not know unless you live within the internal lives of a woman with ADHD. If you're in their immediate family, their family would know, the husbands, the wives, the children would know, because of how this condition manifests, in women especially, is in our emotional dysregulation. And I struggled for many years questioning whether I was a good parent, because how I could love my children so much in 1 minute, but when I feel agitated or tired, I can be a completely different person.
So important for us to realize is, I think it was the moment that you and I met when we were doing our podcast, was when I started to suspect I had ADHD, just because of, the similar things that I had experienced. And I've never had a diagnosis, but I'm certainly proceeding and seeing my life now as having ADHD, and moving forward on that basis. So, again, your work is causing many women, I think, to reflect on their life and their experiences, and maybe reframe it and look in a different way, and embrace what we have, and move forward with lots of enthusiasm. So I do not see any questions coming through. I'm going to give everyone another. Oh, sorry, here's one. Do you have any tips for helping to address stigma of ADHD? That's a great question, Christiane.
Yeah, well, thanks, Christian. Thanks for the question. Would this be stigma around ADHD in your workplace, or stigma in the internal lives, or around the people, who you are, like connected to? So I talked about how to address stigma in the workplace. And unfortunately, because at the workplace, what we do I think we are quite vulnerable, to disclosing our ADHD. That's why I always say that, do you really have to disclose your ADHD? And for me, it's really important for people, who are immediately close to us, like our partners or our family that we live with, know that we have the condition. And for the workplace, I don't think it's important for them to know unless it is in your interest and benefit for people to know. And within our close environment, within our family, actually, they do suggest that in order to support and treat someone with ADHD, the medication is only the first step. And the awareness that the family has, is very important as well. It should be one of the strategies in treating you, because you can work on yourself, but because of so many things we do, the impact of ADHD is on our surroundings, on our family. That our family should also be on our side. We should, like send them lots of educational materials, improve their psycho education. So it's not just for you, it's for the people as well that you interact with. So if that makes sense.
That's great. Thank you. We have one other question. Hi, Sam. I'm a new parent, just returning to work from mat leave and newly diagnosed with ADHD. Do you know of any resources for new parents trying to navigate how to ADHD, aside from